So in the past couple of days with the Giants Hard Knocks episode airing, we got a real inside look into what really went down between the Giants, what the GM and owner were saying when it came to Saquon Barkley. Of course, he decided to sign with the Philadelphia Eagles, but we got a lot of insight into what really went down. And you could tell that the Giants owner, John Mara, really sounded like he wanted Saquon Barkley to stick around in New York. He said, "I'll have a tough time sleeping if Saquon goes to Philly, I'll tell you that." He also said, "As I've told you, I've been around enough players, but he's the most popular player we have by far." But it sounded like Giants GM Sheen did not want to go over a certain number, which seemed to be around, I think it was like $12 or so million per year, $25 million, $12.5 million per year, $25 million guaranteed, which I think is a wise decision. I don't think you need to overpay a running back with the type of roster the Giants currently have. But here's what Colin Cowherd had to say. He was pretty critical of the Giants and their front office and what went down here. So let's take a listen to this right here earlier today on Colin Cowherd, The Herd.
Sometimes the owner has kids in the building. Sometimes the owner can be, like Jim Irsay in Indianapolis, a little impulsive. Sometimes, almost all the time, the owner thinks he knows more about football than he does. But there was a moment in this. So John Mara is sitting there on the table, and this is before Saquon Barkley in free agency left for the rival Eagles. And the GM is Joe Shane, a handsome young guy from Buffalo. He's got two underlings in the chairs. Watch all the body language with this and listen as Mara is just really uncomfortable with his star Saquon Barkley going to rival Philadelphia potentially. That's really bad. Like, the owner's not happy. Joe Shane's smiling. The underlings have their head down. Like, it's really uncomfortable. And he doesn't have an answer. Well, I'm hearing that, but it may not be true. So if you're hearing it via a text, you don't trust your sources? I trust mine, and I'm just a radio guy. You're a GM. Do you think that's what it looks like with Les Snead and Stan Kroenke and Sean McVay potentially? Or Brett Veach and the Hunt family? That's Mickey Mouse. Joe Shane's smiling. The underlings are uncomfortably looking down. The owner's got his hand on his face. And Joe Shane's answer is, well, I don't really know. If Lachlan Murdoch, who owns this company, was in my morning meeting and said, I'd be really uncomfortable if you didn't talk about soccer a lot today, you know what my lead would be? Soccer. Read the room. Read the owner.
So it sounds here like Colin Cowherd is saying Sheen should have just gone with what the owner wanted. And in those clips, you know, I feel like as the owner, you have that ability to say, I'm the owner, like, do this or else. I mean, he is in charge of who is hired and who is fired. And I feel like with the Dallas Cowboys, that probably happens a lot with Jerry Jones, who seems to be in a lot of control there. But here in New York, it sounds like Mara didn't really specifically say, you know, we need to keep Saquon Barkley. Like, I'm making that decision. That's what we're going to do. It sounds like Sheen has a pretty, has a lot of control there in New York. The fact that he was able to, not keep Saquon Barkley, which I think it was a wise move by the Giants organization for Sheen to not pay Saquon Barkley what Saquon Barkley was looking for. I think that if you have a really good roster built around your team and, you need another, you want to keep an elite top tier running back, like let's say the 49ers with Christian McCaffrey, then okay, I think that makes sense. But for a team like the Giants that has last year, one of the worst pass blocking and run blocking offensive lines in the NFL, it doesn't really matter who your running back is. And I think just because of how bad of a situation it was in New York, it wasn't wise to keep around Saquon Barkley, who honestly, he wasn't playing at a top tier level last season. He was, still productive, but not as productive as he has been in years past. And so I think the decision to let Barkley go is a fine decision by Sheen. Clearly, the owner seemingly wanted to keep Barkley, but I do think you can give Sheen some credit that he's not, getting pressured by the owner. I think, it's a GM's job to make these football decisions and do what they think is best. That's why they're hired. Of course, sometimes owners can come in and make decisions and say, no, we're going to do this. But clearly in this situation, Mara didn't really, say this is what's going to happen. He allowed his GM to do what his GM wanted to do. But you could tell Mara wanted Barkley to stay, and it did look pretty uncomfortable in that room from that clip. You can see sort of standing there saying that he would be pretty uncomfortable at it would be hard for him to sleep at night if Barkley wasn't there because he's one of the most popular players. But I don't think it's honestly that bad if you're the GM and you make a move that you think is best for your team. I understand it. That's sort of what your job is. Let's continue to hear this.
Like, the bottom line is maybe Mara created some of this stuff because he wanted to re-sign Daniel Jones, and I don't think anybody else in the world wanted to in New York. But I watch the Giants here, and there is a disconnect between owner and GM, and I'm uncomfortable watching it. You ever watch Jeopardy when there's 3 people on there and 2 are really smart and 1 isn't, and one's getting crushed, and you're kind of uncomfortable for the person getting crushed? Like, I'm uncomfortable watching Joe Shane there. Like, bro, you got to have answers. When billionaires walk into rooms, if I know I'm going to have a member of the Murdoch family in a room I'm in, I prep for it. Even if it's over a glass of wine and a brief 90-second conversation, I'm ready to roll. If that's what the GM-owner conversations look like, well, my sources tell me, I don't know if that's true. So you don't know anything. You're the GM. You don't really know anything. And that's the owner. And it's so predictable for Joe Shane and the Giants. Saquon's going to go crush in Philadelphia. He's a great player. Howie Roseman is just working the Giants. He gets a great player, and he's going to create angst inside that Giants building all season because he's going to go to New York and rush for 120 yards and 2 touchdowns, and the back page of the New York Post is going to be, "Oh, no, Joe." But I'm sorry, watching this thing with the New York Giants, I have no confidence in this organization. None. I mean, you could see the underling. You can see the assistants in the chair. They don't want to make eye contact with anybody. Everybody's uncomfortable in that room.
The thing that is true about the situation is you could tell from that clip that they weren't really on the same page. But I guess, like, what are you supposed to do in those situations if you're the owner, if you're the GM, if you have a disagreement? If the GM is in charge of football operations, clearly he, in this situation, was the one who decided to, go through with the plan they had to move on from Barkley. And I want to read this part that was a little excerpt from the show by the New York Post. And this is what it said. Next, Coach Brian Daboll sits down in Sheen's office, and they discuss a variety of free agents. Sheen says, "I think the priority is the offensive line," and Daboll agrees. They discuss guards John Runyon and Robert Hunt in tackle/guard. Jermaine Illuminor. And so it sounds like Daboll and Sheen wanted to bolster the offensive line instead of bringing in Saquon Barkley. Of course, they decided to bring in Devin Singletary at only $5.5 million per year, so almost $7 million per year less than if they would have kept Saquon Barkley from his number signing with Philadelphia. And so it sounds like those guys were on the same page, but I think there was that uncomfortability in that room because the owner wanted something different. But I think that if you're the owner and if his mind that they needed to keep Saquon, then he should have said, we're keeping Saquon Barkley. That's my decision. I'm overruling you. But he didn't do that. And so Sheen just sort of went through with what he thought was best, which I honestly think for this team, it's better for them to move on from Saquon Barkley. He's a solid player. He is getting older. He's 27 years old. I saw a clip from earlier where Sheen was talking about the data and what happens to running backs who are in their late 20s, like 27 years old. The data shows that those guys start to decline. And so I don't think it's usually a good idea to pay running backs a good amount of money later in their career, especially for a team like the Giants that has a terrible offensive line, a terrible offense, a terrible defense. I just don't think it's wise to use that money at the running back position. And they instead get a cheaper running back who had more yards per carry last year than Saquon Barkley, Devin Singletary at 4.2 yards per carry. And they instead are able to bring in John Runyon Jr. and Luminar as well. And so I think that all in all, this team is better trying to bolster their offensive line. Saquon Barkley probably will have more success in Philadelphia because their offensive line is that much better, but I don't think just with Saquon Barkley going and finding success in Philadelphia, it makes it a bad move for the Giants. It's where Saquon Barkley chose to go. He could have chosen to not join a rival, and that's where he wanted to go. So That's basically it. But if you want more NFL content, feel free to subscribe down below, and I'll see you guys next time.